How you doing, Brooklyn?
We're in April's borough, so
Yes.
yes. And thank you to Laura and the Photoville team. They really supported, Contact High, the book that came out way before. And I think that's something that they are amazing at, is recognizing creative entrepreneurs,
Yes.
supporting it, giving them a voice right here in Brooklyn. And so something that, they just had the instinct to see and say, yeah, this needs to be shown, is now, so much more. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Yes, and
Big,
thank you to
big,
Photoville.
big thank you, Photoville.
Yes.
And
So-
the team, because I know there were many days when you guys were like, she calls one more time. But it takes teamwork, and I really appreciate you, because that is a dream come true for me. So thank you.
Yeah, and truly, have a look if you haven't seen it. We're also going to be doing a book signing after, which I'll mention again. But April's personal archive.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I want to thank you.
Aw.
Really,
Such a love fest
really,
up here.
But it's real.
People are like,
right?
get to the talking.
It's real. Women empower women, and that's a hashtag. But this is truth, because Laura was not lying. I would not have met Laura had it not been for Vikki. So we got to give people their flowers when they're here, and I appreciate you, really.
Thank you. Well, so I started appreciating April before I even knew her. I knew of her. When I was working in the music business in the early 90s, April was, amazing. She was doing all of the styling. She had WalkerWear, which we'll get into. But when I went about putting together Contact High, the book, of course, it's about the photographers who shot hip hop. But when you start to dissect the photos and start really looking at the archives and start pulling out all those details that you see in photos, you learn a deeper story of the music. So naturally, you start seeing WalkerWear on the shirts.
Right.
You start seeing all these little details of who was behind the scenes, not just the musicians, not just the photographer, but who really built and documented the culture at a deeper level. So I kept seeing April, in there. And so it's just really important to talk about it. When you talk about photography and the culture and talk about that collaboration. So
Right.
I was like, let's just go deep into April's story, which of course starts here in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Born and raised, which is increasingly a rarity here in Brooklyn. So
But let's fix that. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. So I was born in LA,
oh, shoot. Goodbye.
but I was raised in Brooklyn. Like literally, I've been here since all my life. So I claim Brooklyn, and Brooklyn claims me. So
It really does, yes. So take us back to Brooklyn. Obviously, it was a different Brooklyn than it is now. What were you seeing growing up that influenced your future work?
So I grew up in Brooklyn when it was a war zone. It was post-civil rights, so to speak. We just now Vietnam, think Vietnam War, think New York and Brooklyn looking like a war zone, literally. And it wasn't gentrified. So where I lived, which was in Bed-Stuy, between Madison, between Nostrand and Marcy, which was called N.A. Rock, was very different. You couldn't come out the house smiling, because you were a target if you were. So you knew what, a screw face was, this. And it was real, that was the kind of, just to give you the description. But I also grew up in a time when my father was a nationalist as a kid. So it was very be proactive and about your own people, from the door. And I learned very early, like, this is interesting. Why don't we have the same opportunities in our schools as other schools? Because the thing was, even though we lived in a poor neighborhood, my father and mother made sure we traveled. So I didn't just see my neighborhood. I was one of the few that left the block, so to speak. And that opened my world to the rest of the world. And I think you think differently the younger you are and the more exposure you can get. So I saw like there's a big world out there at a very early age. I was fortunate enough to see that. And I was fortunate enough to be with a creative father. My father was in the music industry. And
He was a manager, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So my
But
father started out as a jazz manager first, right? McCoy Tyner, Gary Bartz, Jackie McLean, Renee McLean, a lot of the legends that you know. Like I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and be backstage at a jazz set. That was the norm of what I grew up on. But I remember as things shift, I became when I started getting older, he started getting into R&B, and then it started being D Train and all these, D Train, and he managed jazz and Jay Z, and it started just being different and taking it from there. But yeah, that gave me the gumption to think differently too, watching him literally dance to his own beat.
I mean, in some ways, the whole entrepreneur thing and Brooklyn and your father, was that a big part of what you were seeing in your day to day that later influenced you? Like, tell us, what did Brooklyn look like back then?
Graffiti all over the place. It wasn't. There weren't trash cans on every corner, so it was dirty. It was darker than it is now because the buildings weren't clean. There were telephone booths on the corner, and and basketball courts. Right, we played basketball. Right on the courts were full on the weekends, which is something you don't see now. Right, and paddleball was big. I remember paddleball. Like I loved handball and paddleball. So those are things we did as kids. But we also drew chalk, and we did Scully, and we did all of that. Hopscotch and all double dutch, and that the Johnny pumps were taken off in the summer because it was too hot. So you wanted to get under the water, and we didn't have sprinklers, and we made our own with the cans, and that was New York City. Going to the bodegas. The bodegas were staples. These were priceless moments for me. Like those were things to do, to have enough money to go to the store to get your now-a-laters. Now, like the fish, the Swedish fish, and who knows that? Come on, somebody, talk to me.
The honey buns.
Okay,
Hi,
we
Ann.
can go on. Those were the moments.
And when did it start clicking, like, for you about little fashion details, style? I'm sure, an industry was not quite in your mind yet. But do you remember a moment when you really started to pick up on it and started kind of understanding what you were seeing?
So when you're looking at these slides, check my father out, because as I look now that I have been talking a lot and telling my story, it makes me think about a lot of things. And my father really and my mother had a lot of influence on my style. And I think it was because they cared so much of my grandparents, and it was important how you left the house. And my father was more of it. My mom was just sharp, right? She just was sharp, and she managed to me be sexy but stay clothed. And my father and my mother is Mexican and Navajo Indian, and so she's from Denver, and so she loved like nature and outside and that outdoorsy look, but at the same time she'd wear something with turquoise or something that represented like that Midwest vibe, right? My father was just post hippie slash gangster slash you didn't know where he was going on which day of the week, right? He just woke up and literally was like, this is what I'm rocking. But he was traveling the world too. So we would be embarrassed when he comes to school, but he would be like, I'm fly. So that being different from a very early age, watching him be different. Now I understand, like, it definitely helped me to be different. I remember one time I thought I was the flyest, and I was going to school. It was high school. This is when Sassoons were out. Who remembers Sassoons? And I had on like a whole turquoise outfit with Sassoons and an Izod shirt, and I had penny loafers on. Everything was turquoise, and he was like, don't do that, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? This is so fly. And he was like, no, it's not. Like, you need to put some plaid on or switch it up. Like, wear some plaid with some stripes. And I remember him saying that, like, are you kidding me? Meanwhile, like a few years later, I started wearing Willie Smith. Willie Smith was plaid, stripes, and all of it. And then I started. So you remember things that people plant.
Well, and of course, Willie Smith being one of the early black
Absolutely.
designers. I mean, this is a moment in time before urban fashion
Right.
or like now it's, so dominant in the industry, but really that moment in time, this is before, right as you're having this big entrepreneurial moment in urban fashion, and you decide to start a store.
Right.
And at a young age, a woman from Brooklyn decided to open a store called Fashion and Effect.
Right.
So tell us, and this question is going to coincide with my favorite slide in the presentation. So what was that moment that made you say, I'm going to open a store? Because also at the same time, right, in different pockets of New York, of course, you have Dapper Dan in Harlem
Right.
starting, his store
Right.
and making like these custom things for the urban market, which the mainstream had not really recognized yet.
Right.
So tell us about the
That
birth
period.
of that. Yeah.
So, like I said, Dad was one influence, but then, so part of that influence was me getting I had a pass to get in all of New York City's hot spots before I was legal to go frequent them. So I would go with my father. So I remember like one time being at the Beacon Theater and going downstairs, and like Luther Vandross was just sitting there with his crew, and me being like, you know, I remember key moments that like I was a kid. I remember my father working with Curtis Blow, and this is somebody I used to tape on Friday nights to hear his music. So, but this is like Empire. We're talking about Empire, Copacabana, Zanzibar, Bonds International, Broadway's International, Latin Quarters, like all of these places that D-Train or somebody would be performing. So as I'm doing that, I'm watching people and the way they dress, right? Because I'm vibing off of the music. I'm not just vibing off of the music. I'm living that, right? I really was. Like, I was soaking up all of that energy because didn't have a choice. Like, I grew up Saturday morning, he was turning on the music. This is what it is. You're going to just do your chores to Stevie Wonder, and it's like, you live that. So then I start taking that torch in high school, like, well, I'm hanging out with my friends and this is what we're doing. And hip hop in the 80s, I think the spirit of entrepreneurship kicked in hard for hip hop. And so I started seeing like Run DMC, Fresh Fest. He's on stage with, they're on stage with their shell toes and their leather pants. And I'm like, everything about Dress for Success was a lie. Because they're telling you this is the way you have to dress, this is what you have to do to be successful. And I'm watching them sell out the garden like, what? I'm like, that's what I want to do, So I think early on I kicked in, like, but I didn't know what it would be at that time. And I was in college. I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. And I walked in Dapper Dan's. And so that, to me, made a lot of sense because by this time we were manipulating our jackets. We were bleaching our stuff. We were putting bling bling on. We would buy like DKNY with the leggings and DKNY up there. The same things they're doing now. We were doing them in the 80s, but we were changing them up a little bit. So we would put rhinestones on our stuff. We would airbrush out a Levi's jacket. We would do acrylic painting on it. We would put something. My store, I had Don't Believe the Hype, and then Don't Believe the Hype shirts with like gold fronts on like we would just flip whatever it is. We would take it and say, this is the way we're going to do it. Like we'd wear riding pants with riding boots, and we weren't on horses. So this is what we did back then. That was hip hop, though, right? It was often taking something that we weren't allowed to be involved with, or like saying we don't want you there, and we would say no, we're going to make it our own, and we're going to do it this way. So in that culture of changing things around, we didn't have those choices in the store, and so that, to me, just it was a natural thing that was there, and I didn't realize it until I walked into Dapper Dan's. And Dapper Dan's Harlem, I love Dapper Dan's, and I loved it, but I was like, Brooklyn is a whole different vibe. Brooklyn was just so different, and I was like, there's nothing in Brooklyn like this. This I'm gonna create my own clothes and for my own tribe because I know it already, and that's how Fashion in Effect actually started.
Was it hard to
Oh yeah.
find a shop? Because nowadays, especially like if you tell a young woman like go and open the store,
It's not that easy.
it's virtually impossible. But
It was very hard.
It was hard even back then.
It was hard. It's relative, right? Because now it's just more money, but then we thought it was a lot of money too,
Right.
at that time. And
Right.
it was. I remember my father just talked to me recently about it, and he was like, "I can't believe you came home with a lease at 21. Like, I got a store, you know." And I'm like, I can't either. Now, like, you look back, like, how did those things happen? But I'm a big person of faith too. So I believe God leads us. We just follow, and sometimes we don't know that. But I remember it was a lot of hustle. It was a lot of hustle, and we started working out of my house first. So we literally had machines in my house, and I borrowed a few tailors from Dapper Dan and found some tailors in other places. We'd stand outside of the factories. We'd find factories in New York. We'd take someone that was fluent in Spanish, and we'd interpret, and we found a way to get people to work with us. And once we started working in the house and we started getting orders and we started busting out at the seams, we knew we had to go to the store and figure a store out.
So I want to continue that story, but I want to just interject here, given that we're at a
Yeah.
photography focused event. Who is documenting all these moments? I mean, these are your personal snapshots, but if you look at
Right.
your exhibit outside, a lot of the early photographers who are part of Contact High are
Right.
also credited in your early photos. Michael Benabib, who's
Shout
here
out to
with
that
us,
Michael.
hello. Danny Hastings, Jamel Shabazz,
Absolutely.
Ernie Panicoli. What was the collaboration process with you as a young fashion entrepreneur, with photographers, with artists? Like, did you feel like you guys were all in this together and something important was happening?
Absolutely.
It seems like you were all trying to figure it out together.
That's exactly what it was. So now we have this whole history and thread that we can go like this too. But as you're creating it, you're not thinking that far, right? But energy feeds energy. That's across the board. So your tribe is your tribe, right? You feel that like there's energy and synergy here. Like we know, like, okay, we're gonna build something. What it is, we don't know, but you're a tribe member, right? You can kind of get that. Creatives have that kind of energy. So I think it was Voltroning a lot. That I like to use that word because it's basically this when I started Fashion in Effect, it was airbrushes and graffiti artists and photographers and all of these different people that would literally come in the shop and just hang out. And that's how ideas spark, right? Because you're talking and you're talking about different ideas. And oh, I could bring the clothes to that. I can bring the clothes to that. You could put this on artwork on it, and you could shoot it. And so it literally was thinking that far at that moment, in that moment, and then finding out we created that later.
That's so beautiful. And so at this time too, hip hop, of course, had been around for years, but it was also this moment where it was recognizing its own power.
Right.
And you start to see the creations of the superheroes of hip hop.
Right.
And you start meeting them as young,
Right.
co-creatives. So Biggie, uh, Tupac, and I'll pause here for a minute, but really anyone and everyone from that time.
Right.
And, one thing as I go back and look at, different interviews of, Tupac especially, was very into supporting Black designers.
Right.
You and Carl Kanai, he specifically called out that if they come to me, I'm not going to charge them to be in their ad campaigns. I'm not going to charge them to rep their stuff.
Right.
What were you feeling from the artists at the time, and who did you really click with?
It was so different then because it wasn't a money grab. It wasn't about a money grab. Sure, we wanted to make money and we wanted to live and be able to pay our bills, but we really were doing what we loved first, right? And we were so young and so green. We didn't think of it as this multi-billion-dollar business that exists today. It was the art first, I think, in a lot of senses. So, and it was, again, collaboration over competition, right? And it was, so I think they wanted to support me because they believed in the product. Because if the product wasn't right, I don't care. They would be like, I'm good. But, but B, because they saw I was young, I was hustling, and they saw a Black woman that was behind a brand that they wanted to support. I think that, and I don't even know. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know if it was just that, because I think that part was colorblind. I think they just wanted dopeness, and they saw I was really part of the culture. That was it. At that time, I met Tupac. He was a roadie. Like that's when I met him, you know what I mean? So, and I was doing styling. We're talking about pictures. Styling really made me understand how important photography was, because now I had to literally collaborate with the photographers on bringing something to life in the image that the record company wanted, the manager wanted, and the artist wanted. And more than likely, those were three different things. Right, Michael? So, so, so you had to be clever enough to find that happy medium and still get what you wanted and execute that. And a lot of times it was a close collaboration between the stylist and the photographer leading, and the stylist falling in line with whatever that vision was, if it was a good stylist, to bring that to life. So.
And even the concept of a stylist in hip hop was new.
Right, it was totally new.
I mean, before up to this time, artists got photographed in what they
That was
showed
it.
up, and they showed up oftentimes looking amazing. But this concept of styling really kind of was ushered in during this time.
Yeah.
By the way, I was doing my research for today, and I came upon an eBay listing for the jersey, and it was like $4,000. Wow. I was like, oh.
Yes.
So let's talk about the era of the stylist. I mean, your colleagues at the time were people like Groovy Lou, who became Biggie's main stylist, Misa Hilton, who
And they actually came after me. That's what's crazy. I was so early on. You hit it head on. Like when I started, there weren't really stylists. You know, like at that time, it was literally them bringing their clothes to the shoots, and they had to fight to get me. Like Audio 2 was my first cover, paid cover. I mean, paid.
I think
That was
we
my
have that.
yeah. That was my right there, and that was
Yeah.
my first paid one. But then right after that, they asked for me to do a video, and that was the first time I probably did a video, and got paid for it. And I was like, this is another revenue stream. You know, we need to start styling. And so I found out about Classic Concepts. And Classic Concepts was Ralph McDaniels and his partner. And they were doing a lot of the videos, Finesse and Sequence. They were doing Professor X, Main Source. These are the videos I started doing on working with these different artists in that frame. But a lot of times, you know, I remember working with Nikki D and Naughty by Nature, and a lot of times we literally would have to fight with the record company on budgets, and they shopping. Why can't they just bring their clothes from home? You know, like they didn't want to pay a stylist fee and then a budget for the the clothing, you know, fashion wardrobing. So those were some of the battles we would have early on. And then, yeah, Misa came in right with Uptown Records, and they came right after they started coming in and coming in hard. And I went on to focus on WalkerWear.
Right. And so WalkerWear often, so I love this photo too. A lot of people didn't know that WalkerWear was run by a woman.
Right.
Was that purposeful? Tell us about, did you feel like you were part of this group of entrepreneurs? I mean, Carl Kanai, Cross Colors, Mecca, Nietzsche, Fubu, like that was all starting at the same time, but you were the only woman
Right.
entrepreneur in the group. I'm guessing you didn't think too much on it, like maybe
Right.
now thinking more on it in hindsight, because when you're young and you just
Right.
do what you do.
Right.
But really, a lot of people did not know that a woman was behind WalkerWear. So talk about that a little bit.
So I think that that's a great question. I think that early on I thought people didn't know because I thought that it was a very misogynistic time with hip hop too, right? And with the 80s were really different than now, right? And so I wasn't sure, being one of the first urban brands, period, in this space, that if I was a female bringing out a menswear brand, that people would support it. So I chose to stay incognito and not do a lot of press and stay behind the scenes and build the logo up first and let that brand build before I started really doing press and coming out like, oh, this is my brand. Like that picture, by that picture, I was on the map and I was in all the stores and I was a national brand. So, you know, and those that knew in hip hop knew. It was funny because the inside industry knew, right? Because I was working with these artists, and the way I was able to work with the artists was we would go to the clubs. We would be the promo team to be like, hey, I remember sitting in the Nico Hotel for the awards, and I knew they were coming out there to shop, and it was a big award, like it's Soul Train American Music. We would sit in the hotel lobby and set up a suite upstairs with like a showroom, and we would just tell them all go upstairs and check it out, and that's how we would product place, you know. And they would buy at that time. They would actually buy. So it was different, but it was a lot of hustling, and it was, yeah, I think that they knew, but the world didn't know, and the ones that knew were the ones that wanted to support it, and luckily they were the ones at that time that mattered, like Biggie, like Tupac, like Run DMC, and I think that this world is very follow the leader. So once you have a big enough A-lister or a celebrity that's a superstar saying, this is dope, everybody else kind of fell in line.
Well, and to
part
that,
of that. You know what
yeah,
I
no,
mean?
no, but to that end, it was so authentic.
That yeah.
And this was also coincided with a time where the big brands of the time really actively didn't want hip hop wearing their brands or repping,
Absolutely.
Polo or Tommy Hilfiger or things like that, which is wild given nowadays if you
Right.
have whoever sitting in your front row,
It's right.
it's a big sea change, but and then that gave way, I guess, to you guys being able to do that entrepreneurial thing.
Right.
But what happened when finally it started clicking with the big brands? Like, oh, urban fashion is
It's
big
big, right?
money, it's big influence, it's the future. So, what started happening to the brands that really were part of the culture?
So I think there were choices to be made, like everything else. I think corporate America, once they find out um, that we can make money off of this, that the art and the self-expression slowly starts eroding, and it becomes such a massive business, they dilute the art form, right? Whatever that is, no different in fashion. And you either play the game or you sit on the sidelines. And I never was good at playing the game. So I think that I was offered a lot of deals that went awry. But I can tell you that there were a lot of other people that imagine you're young, you're in your early 20s, you have no understanding of business, you're creative, you're doing what you love, and um, you get offered whatever you get offered, right? But if you don't know business, it can look really good, you know? So a lot of that started happening, and a lot of brands started blowing up because of their distribution. They might have had more distribution, but then when you look at the numbers, it was a seesaw that wasn't like level, or close to level. And then the other part of it is with everything, there's a formula. It's important not to oversaturate. So if you have a store, 10 stores on every block selling the same merchandise, after a while, it's not hot anymore. People don't want accessibility and overkill. That never works. What made hip hop and authentic brands authentic was not being so accessible, being hard to get, not everyone having it everywhere. Right now, it's different to me. I can name a few brands that are really hot and you can get everywhere, you know. But then it was definitely like less is more.
Also, so I was watching. There's a great documentary about Jamel Shabazz. I watched it on YouTube, but it's available everywhere. And there's this part in there where Fab Five Freddy is talking about Jamel's early photographs and this idea of cool. And Fab said something really interesting. He's like, cool was often used as armor for the urban community. It's not just like, he's like, it was deeper than selling clothes to the average Joe. It was deeper than just having wide accessibility. And, this idea of cool as armor as a deeper concept for certain people. Talk about that. I know it's a little bit of an esoteric question, but I wanted to, because it was talked about in the role of photography of Jamel's early photos of Brooklyn, like they call it now street style, but it was just people. But talk about that idea and the importance of the work behind it.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to make sure I understand your question. Um, in terms of the image that we saw, like in a lot of that period, in the authentic, like Jamel Shabazz, some of those photos. Those were just candid shots, right? I'm not saying candid. He might have said, "Can I take your shots?" But those were real people at real places, and they didn't dress up for a photo shoot. That was just real, and it was so important for people. We might not have a lot of money, but we're gonna show you we have style. We're gonna show you that we're just as good as everyone else, and we're fly, and we're proud of that. And it was really important. And it was also like, you couldn't come to school with rejects, even though I did, but it wasn't cool to do that. I remember asking my father for some Pro-Keds, and he was like, "You're going to keep wearing those rejects, and unless you buy them." And I bought them. I saved up my money and I bought them. I remember the first time I was wearing them, and he was like, "Okay." But it was important to me because we had peer pressure. That was very real. But I think that, right, fashion is the best form of drag. And so the way we dress can change an entire mood. And if you're coming out of the house and you're in an environment that is just different than the rest of the world, you want to shine. And this is a great way to help you shine and show that we matter. Did I address that?
Yeah,
Like that
no,
was it?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
At what point, like looking back now, do you feel like, I mean, now you've moved into being an advocate for health and wellness, but do you feel like you have this legacy that the personal archive needs to be seen? I mean, this is the first time you're really showing your personal archive here at Photoville, but when did you kind of start thinking about archiving and preserving that legacy?
I think I've always been a hoarder for saving my photos. I love saving photos and moments in time. I'm so mad. There are so many photos that I didn't take. So many moments. Because I didn't understand photography. I didn't know what those moments would mean later. You know what I mean? And you're just going, going, going. I should have had somebody, and we should have always been taking pictures. And I lost so many over the years. But even with that, I have more than most, right? So I'm fortunate. And so now I see how big the culture has become. And it's surreal when I really think about my life and what's happened in it, and the people that I've been touched, and they've touched me, and they have a place in my heart. And God willing, we worked together. We were friends. It's just a lot of moments that are just magical. And my life literally has been, to me, like, wow. So in that, we don't tell our stories, and if we don't tell our stories, they won't know. People won't know. And I think our history, we are in a time where we have the opportunity to control our narrative and tell our story and tell it the way we want to tell it, and not worry about it going away. But because we can document it forever, right? Content is king. So you put it out there and it can live forever, and it can amplify at any time. But don't wait. I don't know what tomorrow brings. So I realize that now, and that's why Photoville is important, and this is important, and this is important, us talking, because there are probably some people in the audience that might not have even known, who is she, So now you know.
Yeah, and you yeah, and you truly do have like a much better photo archive than, for a non-photographer. Yeah, like the Mike Tyson. I mean, that's incredible, wearing the WalkerWear logo in the ring behind the scenes. This is a photo I referenced earlier of you with.
I think that's a selfie.
There you go. So So tell us. So this photo is pretty recent, right? So you have Carl Kanai there in the foreground, but tell us about what was happening because it looks like a meeting of the minds in urban fashion.
Right. That was actually at the All Eyes on Me. Lionsgate flew us out to do a talk about Tupac in California, and that was there. And we did clothes for the movie. And
Tell us who's in the photo. So
okay,
Carl Kanai is
so
in the
that's
foreground.
yeah, that's Carl Kanan. Next to him is All Style on Instagram. They're really big. He fashion, blogging, etc. He's a tastemaker. Next to him is Jerry Lorenzo from Fear of God, another dope brand that's now. And then next to them are Cross Colors, Carl Jones and T.J. Walker. So those are also very important early brands that paved the way for a lot of urban fashion. So that is like now and then at the table. And we were all having this discussion on the impact of Tupac in terms of fashion, in terms of bridging gaps, in terms of West Coast and East Coast, and in terms of Jerry Lorenzo and All Style. I'm saying All Style. That's the hashtag or the Instagram, but how they are now. That relationship between Carl Kanai, myself, and Cross Colors, and then them, how they perceive that to be. You know what I mean?
What do you hear from like the Jerry Lorenzos of the world, the kind of younger entrepreneurs that are going through now what
Right.
you went through as a
Right.
21-year-old? What do they ask you? What do you tell them? What's the dialogue?
I mean, some of them ask, not Jerry Lorenzo, but 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 some of them don't, because honestly their tools are so much more abundant than we had. You know, it's real. Like you could go on anything from what is it, cabbage, whatever, to I'm sure you guys, if you're entrepreneurs, you probably get a million things in the mail to say how you can get money today, like on a loan, or there's so many platforms that exist from Kick Further to et cetera, et cetera. I could go down the list, but it's easier than we didn't have the internet. We didn't have money bags trying to give us money, and people didn't believe in hip hop when we started. Right? Hip hop is hip hop now. It's not even hip hop. So I think it's a lot easier to sell your ideas. So the things they ask us on now are more like, what was Biggie like?
Right.
I'm keeping it funky. What was Tupac
That
like?
was going to be my next question. I'm just kidding.
But those are the kind of questions we get. And then it was, you know, people do sometimes ask me about being a woman in that male-dominated business. That comes up a lot.
This is a question I just like to ask, and then we have to jump to Q&A. But what advice would your younger self give to you today? What advice would a 21-year-old April Walker give to you today?
So, okay, the first thing that came to mind when you said it was study your money. Study your money. Because I think that a lot of us as creatives think that we're so dope that we're just going to create and just the money's going to roll in, right? If you're really lucky, that happens. But when it does, you have to know how to sustain it and how to grow it and how to create annuity growth and all these different things that you're probably not taught in high school or junior high school unless you're super lucky. So that takes focus. That takes having the right team around you. That takes sometimes going after the right team to grow in those areas. But I think when we're young, if you start winning really young, a lot of times, I don't want to call it cockiness, but it is, because you think I'm good, I got this, it's gonna be fine, and it's not until you hit You go like this, that you're like, oh, okay. That humble pie kicks in.
So, excuse me. We're gonna open it up to Q&A. I think somebody has a microphone. Sure. Yeah, I think. I mean, we'll probably be able to just speak up. Um, okay. Okay. Um,
So you know what? Why don't people come up and
Sure.
I'll stand up and let's bring them on up. You know, if someone has a question, they want to.
oh, sure. Yeah,
You
yeah.
want to do it that way? Or do you want them to hear it? Because that's
I'll
where I
just
wasn't
repeat
sure.
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
then
I'll
that's
just repeat
fine.
it. You can
All
answer.
right, fine.
Yeah. Anyone have a question? Nope. Yep. So, just for the video, I'll just repeat the question. What was your aha moment that made you realize WalkerWear was really it?
For me, it was walking down the street one day and seeing someone I didn't know wear my clothes, and they didn't get it from me. They bought it in a store. That was real. I remember that. And I was like, yes!
That's me.
Because you know they really loved it and they really wanted it and they just bought it not because that's my girl, I'm going to hook her up, you know?
Well, I think any, creative that when they put something into the world, like I felt that way with my book. Like when I saw someone with contact high that I hadn't given it to or was like, you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
somebody actually bought it
Right.
somewhere. Yeah, like, yeah, it's a good feeling for
Great
sure.
one.
Yeah. Yes. So, what's a photo that you wish you would have kept or took?
That's a great question. I wish I would have taken more pictures with Jam Master Jay.
Yeah, well, of course, Biggie, Tupac, Jam Master Jay all passed away. I mean, so these photos stand as a memory, as family photos, as everything. Yeah, so that's a whole other layer to it. Yes? Yeah. You. So the question is from photos that you have, what did you pull the most inspiration from, or what do you look back and um, feel is really makes you proud?
It's funny because I think the biggest things that I see that people ask me for that have inspired me to now do remixes or to come back and reinterpret it or bring them back as limited editions. One is a rough and rugged suit, which is really the suit that put us on the map. It was a bull denim suit. It was really, like, I used to call it bulletproof denim. It was hard. It was, you walk like, but but it was really, we did contrast stitching, and it was really a nice suit. And I remember one of the first big videos was crossover video with EPMD wearing it, and then it just was, EPMD were big supporters, and it just Run DMC, LL Cool J, Pink Cookies, all of these. It was the rough and rugged suit or the vest or the pant, the jacket and the pant that took off, and then the other one was our hockey shirt. The one you said you saw for $4,000. We're gonna do that again.
Yes. Yes. Who today? I'm curious. Would you want to rep that shirt? If you
J.
could-
Cole.
Putting it out there. Okay. This is, by the way, April's book, which she's going to be signing around the corner afterwards. So come through, say hi. I think we have about 10 more minutes, so we can take a few more questions. Yes.
Did you ever design something that you said, no way that this is ever going to make it, and it shocked you and it took off?
So question is, was there anything that you designed that you really just felt was like, yeah, no?
That's a great question. I'm sure there were, because we designed a lot of different things, and um, I think, oh, I think one of them was the WWNY. We did this whole WWNY program. DKNY actually wanted to send us a cease and desist, which was very hard to do because you can't own NY. But um, but it was different, the font and everything. And I remember one of our graphic designers, super shout out to Bobby Joseph, who was like a superstar in the industry on graphics and design, and he's got his own line. But he did the WWNY, and I went for it because I trusted him, but I didn't think it would be like, and it was a winner.
I mean, we hear the stories of DAP with the cease and desists and all the, raids on his store and everything. Did you ever have anything like that?
No, because I was early enough to see like, oh, okay. When I saw that, once I saw it, so from the beginning we did a lot of original stuff as well as knockoffs, but we were always playing both sides because I knew I couldn't create a brand long term or a business on that alone. And then I saw him getting in trouble over and over, I was like, fizzle this out, you know? So that's how that went.
Okay, yes. Can we have the true meaning of the future Ben female, which is one of the shirts that you're currently creating?
Right. So that's a theme that I'm WalkerWear is going. We've actually been focusing on women now because, hey,
That's it.
you know. But I mean, there are so many women that have made power moves through our history, and when I first heard the future is female, it kind of was like, is. No, you're just realizing it. We've been female. We've been on the map and we've been holding it down for y'all and us. But now you're recognizing, and I'm happy about that. But I'm gonna remind you, the future been female. So that's where that is.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. All right. Yes. So, question is, wisdom earned from your beginnings. What stays with you? What do you carry into the future? What do you leave behind?
So I wrote that book, Walker Gems, Get Your Ass Off the Couch. It's all about the journey. It's all about wisdom my experience and sharing that with my community through what I've learned, and then sharing some of my failures of what hasn't worked for me, because I feel like my biggest, me being rich is in my experience in my life. And I want to share that with my tribe. I'm not taking it to the grave with me. So if it can make you better and you get to your journey faster, where you're supposed to be with your purpose, that's what I want to give. So I think at this point in the game, I'm just focusing on the present and trying to be present and not study too much far ahead, and definitely not look in the past, because you can remember, but just don't stay there, right? It's about, all we have is this moment right now, and just trying to be present in that more, because I think when I was young, I was so driven that there are things that happen that I don't remember because I was thinking about, oh, what I have to do tomorrow, or oh, what I have to do to win. And the thing I realized is the more I've lived, winning takes on another another meaning.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you, April Walker. Join
Thank
us
you,
for the book
Vikki.
signing.
Thank you.